Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. We are still in playoff mode, but the offseason is right around the corner, and there's only three teams now remaining in the playoffs. So with the offseason right around the corner, I think we should talk about 15 players this offseason that I think should be traded. Now, I think these players should be traded. But before we get into the video, make sure to leave a like on the episode. It helps out a ton with the channel. But we can start out right with number 15, Cam Johnson. Somebody who, when he was with Phoenix, signed a long-term deal, gets traded to the Brooklyn Nets in the Kevin Durant trade, and somebody who, in my opinion, had a down year last year just because there was really nobody on the Nets that made it life easy on Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson is a phenomenal off-the-ball shooter who is a solid enough defender to where he's not going to really hurt you on that side of the ball. But I think Cam Johnson, his biggest factor is when you're going to get the most valuable part of Cam Johnson when he's also around other good players. Like when you look at Phoenix when he was with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, two guys that made just life easier on him to space the floor. He's a knockdown catch and shoot guy, but had a down year with the Brooklyn Nets, and I think it could hurt his stock in terms of the Brooklyn Nets trading him this offseason. And I feel like the Brooklyn Nets should have just blew this whole thing up last offseason before, when they did get all these assets, because they could have flipped these assets and got all their picks back from Mikal Bridges, but we'll get down the line. But going into Cam Johnson, I mean, he has 3 more years left on his deal. He has $23 million next year, $21 and then $23 million his last year of his deal before he's an unrestricted free agent. But I do think that's kind of the money that somebody of Cam Johnson's value is going to be worth here in the future. Somebody who is a longer wing that can play the 4 and the 3, that can space the floor and do a little bit of everything for you offensively. But looking at this, so we're going to be breaking down kind of the contract years that are coming up for these players, and then the best fits I feel like for these players that I have coming up. For Cam Johnson, Memphis, I have at the top of the list. I think Memphis is a team that he would probably play the 3 for, could run some 4 if you put Triple J at the 5. But when you have a playmaker like a John Morant, this team, and somebody who likes to get downhill like a John Morant, already having the spacing in a big spot in Triple J is huge, but also adding some more spacing and Cam Johnson being a knockdown shooter for them. They do have kind of the contracts to kind of build this up and make this work to go get Cam Johnson. They still do have draft capital and draft assets. Looking at this, I think it's a seamless fit. You can add even more shooting you could run a lineup of Ja. Probably have Marcus Smart coming off your bench, in my opinion, if I do think that. Probably Ja, Desmond Bane, Cam Johnson, Triple J, put him at the 4, the 5, depending on what they do with the 5-man spot this offseason, because that's something they definitely need to address. But I think this is a great fit with the playmaking of John Morant and his ability to get downhill. Cam Johnson could really flourish again and bounce back off of a down year if he ends up in a situation like Memphis. Similar situation to another good fit had Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, they've been looking for that 3 spot desperately for years. And he adds shooting, something that this team could have used this year for sure, more consistent shooting with the playmaking. Obviously, they still have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on the roster right now. But looking at that and with the way that front court is, they're going to have some contracts that could be moved in a possible trade to go get Cam Johnson. I think he's a great fit for what this team needs in the shooting, and they really need a solidified small forward that could possibly play some forward 3 and the 4, depending on where this roster goes in the offseason. Another team, kind of like the Cavs in the same situation, a team that desperately needs shooting and versatility, the Orlando Magic. I mean, the Orlando Magic are a very versatile unit. I can see a lot of lineups where you could have Cam Johnson play your 3, Franz put at your 2, and then Paolo at your 4. They have a lot of versatile, switchy defenders on this team. They just need shooting. They need to kind of address the point guard spot, which I've had them doing in the past in like mock drafts and everything else like that. But Cam Johnson getting more so at this point, a veteran shooter on that roster to put next to a Franz and a Banchero to add that spacing could be huge. And then the last team I have for best fits on Cam Johnson, I think the Lakers. Obviously, you got the Lakers hat in. I mean, putting him with a LeBron James could definitely do great things with. I think he's a versatile shooter, and they do have the contracts to kind of make this work. I know they definitely have draft picks to make this work. Now, viewing it from the Lakers' perspective, does this move the needle for the Lakers hugely? I don't know. But Cam Johnson is definitely somebody that would benefit this Lakers team that I feel like could use more shooting. Before we get into the rest of the list, I will say there are 3 players that I decided to keep off this because they're just so common names in the trade market as of right now, and I've kind of already talked about them in past videos. Donovan Mitchell with Cleveland, also Darius Garland with Cleveland, and then Trae Young and DeJounte Murray with Atlanta. I just think those 4 bunch of players are just so common and so popular. I have some other options that might be a little bit different, a little bit out there. But 15 is Cam Johnson. Number 14, Keldon Johnson. I mean, somebody who can do a little bit of everything, that is on a very team-friendly contract that could be easily moved. I feel like he's on a front-loaded contract, and he has $19 million next year, and then $17 million the 2 years after that, so 3 years total left on his deal. He's just somebody who can do a little bit of everything. I feel like San Antonio is going in a whole different direction at this point with what they're doing with their young core. I think Keldon Johnson could be the odd man out in terms of them adding some more assets to what they already have in San Antonio. Looking at the best fits, Pacers. I feel like the Pacers are a team that could use another forward like a Keldon Johnson. I like what they've been getting from Aaron Nesmith, but I also think they could definitely add some more depth to that position, especially somebody versatile like Keldon Johnson who could play 2, 3, and 4 for you and do a little bit of everything. I think that's a great fit there. Another fit I have is Cleveland Cavaliers. I think, like I said, kind of with Cam Johnson, they've always been looking for that 3-man that can do a little bit of everything. I think he'd be a great fit there, and they have the contracts to make it work. And then the last fit is going to be a little bit of a stretch to make contracts work depending on what they do, but the Bucks, I think they just need to add some youthfulness to their team, and I think having Keldon Johnson to add some depth to your forward position, being able to play, like I said, 2, 3, and the 4 comfortably, especially with a versatile team like Milwaukee. I feel like he can add scoring, defense, and a little bit of playmaking in the realm. So I think he's a great fit for those 3 spots, and I think Keldon Johnson is also, like I said, with the Spurs, kind of the odd man out in a way because they're also going into this new Wemby era, and I think they're picking probably a Devin Vassell over picking him to kind of keep on their roster to build up with his core, and I think you can still get a decent little return for Keldon Johnson. He's on a really, honestly, a team-friendly contract for what his age is and what he kind of gives you, and I feel like if you put him on a contending situation with the right people around him, I think you could really probably get the most out of Keldon Johnson. Next person I have Mitchell Robinson at 13. Now, Mitchell Robinson, this is going to be more so situation based on what the Knicks do in this offseason. I think entering this offseason with Hartenstein being a free agent, I think when you're looking at this team as a whole, this is a team that's preparing to make deep playoff runs into the future. And Mitchell Robinson, we've seen have injury concerns year in, year out. And I think they might lean towards trading Mitchell Robinson and bringing back Isaiah Hartenstein, who was more healthy, especially in the playoffs. And he played, in my opinion, a little bit way better offensively than Mitchell Robinson, while also not killing them defensively, if that makes sense. I feel like they could possibly lean to trading Mitchell Robinson, and his name has been in trade rumors for years now, but with the Knicks having a very important offseason on their hands, I think they've seen that Hartenstein's a bit of a better fit, and I think Mitchell Robinson could be on the move. He has 2 years left on his contract on a front-loaded deal and another team-friendly contract where if he goes to the right situation, it could be a steal. $14 million next season, and the final year is about $13 million as well. Very team-friendly, in my opinion, for how much contracts are going to be this offseason, in my opinion. Best fits, Memphis. Like I said, a team that is going to be in the market possibly for a 5-man. Lost Steven Adams. I feel like this team is desperately in need of a 5-man. I like Triple J at the 5 in certain situations, but I do feel like they definitely need another 5. And defensively, putting Mitchell Robinson with Triple J together could be disgusting. Then looking at OKC, a team that is definitely going to be in the center market this offseason. They have just been eliminated from the playoffs, and I think a big reason why is because they were kind of dominated inside and in the paint, and they also could use another rim protector next to Chet, because those two and the shot blocking prowess that they both have, I think could be a deadly thing for OKC to add to their roster. And then another team, Golden State Warriors, a team that's definitely going to be like OKC in the market for a 5-man that can protect the rim, block shots, and rebound. Something that they really haven't had since like an Andrew Bogut. That's how long it's been since the Golden State's really had a true rim protector in a way that can really deter and block shots at the rim and rebound at a high level. I think Mitchell Robinson could be that first fit that they've had really since Bogut. So, and I'm not really saying, when I say the Warriors, I mean like an actual 5-man. I'm not talking about some small ball. I'm talking an actual big 5-man. And I think these 3 teams all have the money and the contract situations to make it work. It's just the asking price of the Knicks. What would that be? Going on to the next player. Interesting one, younger guy. Anthony Simons. So looking at Portland, kind of in the same sense of Keldon Johnson, Anthony Simons has already been extended. 2 more years left on his contract. He has $25 million and $27 million before he's an unrestricted free agent. And when he's an unrestricted free agent, he'll be 27 years old, still super, super young. But in a similar position to Keldon Johnson in terms of, I feel like Portland's just kind of going into this new era. And I feel like Anthony Simons could be the odd man out. I mean, when you look at the money they got tied into Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, and I think when you already just drafted Scoot Henderson, you have a Shaedon Sharpe. I think you want that backcourt to be as open as possible and him to have free will. In terms of Anthony Simons, somebody who's probably not trying to go through another 3 to 4 or 5 year process in a rebuild to make the playoffs again. That would be basically his whole career has been a rebuild at this point. So looking at this, I feel like he could be an odd man out and be a valuable chip piece to go get more assets to kind of build this culture and team around Scoot Henderson moving into the future. But when I look at the best fits, it's kind of really hard to pinpoint a certain team. But I feel like if Anthony Simons was on the market, they would get calls for him. So the main point I had here was Anthony Simons is going to fit best wherever the draft capital lies. Wherever the draft capital lies for a team that could use a dynamic 2-guard, combo guard scorer that could come off your bench, I think it would be huge for them to just go wherever there's the most draft capital. That's where the best fit is, especially looking at it from a Portland side of things. I think they need to go get more and more draft capital to try to build this roster out around Scoot Henderson, not so much Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton. But yeah, Anthony Simons, and then the next person kind of goes into that same category. Next person goes into that same category. I have Malcolm Brogdon at 11. Personally, was surprised he wasn't moved at the deadline. He has 1 year left on his contract, $22.5 million. Kind of same thing I said with Anthony Simons. I mean, they're going into a new era, and kind of the Trailblazers basketball want to open up that backcourt because I feel like you could still go into this draft and add some backcourt pieces that better fit and complement Scoot Henderson. And Malcolm Brogdon, I feel like a contender could just always use somebody like Malcolm Brogdon starting or coming off their bench. I do have best fits for Malcolm Brogdon. Miami, top of the list. They could always use another steady guard with the ball, somebody that can play on and off the ball, create for himself, and spot up, catch and shoot situations. Especially on the last year of his deal, I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to find a way to make contracts work. Next fit, Magic. See, Magic are kind of in a similar spot, but they could use a guy like a Malcolm Brogdon, more of a vet. When you see how they got bounced in the first round this year, you could definitely see a team like the Magic wanting to add a veteran steady guard off that bench or even starting, depending on what they do this offseason. Just bringing him in, he fits with whatever they want to do shooting-wise. He's not a bad defender. Playmaking, he play on and off the ball. I think he would be a great fit next to Franz of Banchero. And they're kind of a young team. They can make the salaries work. Next team, 76ers. They're going to have a boatload of draft capital cap space this offseason. Looking at what they could want. D'Anthony Melton is a free agent. I know he had back problems at the end of the year. Don't know where they're going to go with that situation. That could be a seamless fit, putting Malcolm Brogdon next to a Tyrese Maxey. Feel like he could complement Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey very well. Whoever else they bring on that roster will have that cap space. Last team, Lakers. I feel like the Lakers are always going to find a way. They have another first-round pick that they could definitely use. Malcolm Brogdon would fit perfectly next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis, like I said, on and off the ball. It gives them another steady ball handler and shot creator. I feel like he would be a way better fit on both sides of the ball than a D'Angelo Russell. If that's what they want to do, kind of has that replacement. They also have draft capital to use in a trade. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. But I think Anthony Simons and Malcolm Brogdon kind of end up in the same kind of conversation. When you talk about guys that should be possibly traded, now we're getting into the top 10. Number 10, Andrew Wiggins. It's already came out reports that have said the Warriors are actively shopping Andrew Wiggins. Coming off of a really down year with the Warriors. I think he's still going to have a decent market. When looking at his contract, it's not horrible. It's not as bad as I thought it was. He has 2 more years left on his contract, $24 and $26 million with the player option of $30 million. I just feel like a change of scenery could do a lot of things for him, and I feel like he could possibly go to a team and they can tap back into that Andrew Wiggins that was on that Warriors championship run. But Cavs, you drafted him. I think this could be a wait for you guys to bring him home. I mean, depending on what they do with this roster this offseason, having a versatile wing like Andrew Wiggins could be a seamless fit. I know he's coming off a down year, but he's somebody that can give you a little bit of everything: defense, rebounding, shooting, scoring. Like, he can give you a little bit of everything, and a team like Cleveland could desperately use somebody like an Andrew Wiggins, or, like I said earlier, like a Keldon Johnson. They just need to really address that 3 spot, because when you're looking at what they're looking to do moving forward, it seems like they're going to have to pick between Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. So who do you want to be built around that core and everything else like that? Then another fit, Chicago Bulls. They're another team that's kind of lacking at that 3 spot. DeMar DeRozan is up in the air, what they're going to do with him this offseason. Don't know what they're going to do with Zach LaVine as well, or Vucevic, but I feel like Kobe White, DeSumo, they're, I want to say, the 11th draft pick. You still have Patrick Williams. I feel like they could definitely use some more depth at the wing spot. You still have an Alex Caruso. Like, they could definitely use some more depth at those positions. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Because Andrew Wiggins, his contract, not the most team-friendly. I thought it was a lot worse than what it was when I looked at it. But looking at it for the future, I think Andrew Wiggins could definitely be on the move this offseason, because he's really the Warriors' kind of only avenue to really get better. And his contract is big enough to kind of make a lot of big major things happen for the Warriors. Next player, Clint Capella. Somebody who I feel like has been in trade rumors for years now. I feel like this is finally time to pull the trigger on it, with the Atlanta Hawks looking to be shifting into a different era. He can fit with so many different teams. I feel like he's to the point in his career where he can come off the bench or he can start for you. He has one more year, $22 million before he's a free agent. Couple teams he could fit with, a lot of teams he could fit with. I mean, other than these 3 I have listed, I have the Lakers on here because they're desperately lacking a backup big. I feel like they need, with their pick in the draft, and if they do have their pick, because I know the Pelicans could pick swap and everything else, but with their pick in the draft, I don't know if the Lakers would want a younger big backing up Anthony Davis. I think they would look to go for more of a ready now kind of guy, rather than getting somebody like Kelly Ware out of Indiana who could fill that void for them. But I think they could turn to go to try to get a Clint Capella on the team, who you could start and put Anthony Davis at the 4, or have him back up Anthony Davis and give them an actual valuable backup big spot in Clint Capella that can give you some good production, especially with LeBron James on your team. And I also think the Lakers are desperately in need of somebody like him. And for the Hawks, you have the first overall pick. Double O is in need of getting more and more playing time, as he should for sure. They should definitely pull the trigger and move on from Clint Capella. I think the Lakers are one of the best fits for him. Bucks are another interesting fit because of Brook Lopez is getting older. Clint Capella is younger than Brook Lopez. Might not be able to space the floor like Brook Lopez, but he adds more youthfulness, I feel like, to Clint Capella's on the older side, but the Bucks need more depth at that front court position. I feel like I like what you have in Bobby Portis. I feel like he's still on a steal of a contract. Brook Lopez, I feel like at some point is going to regress, and you need to have somebody to bolster up those backup 5 minutes. And then the last team I have is the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis, like I said earlier, is going to be in the market for a center, and I feel like Clint Capella could give them some great rebounding next to a Jaren Jackson Jr., who isn't the greatest rebounder at his position and at his size. So having Clint Capella, somebody who can clean up the boards and rim protect, could be huge for the Memphis Grizzlies, who can make the contracts work and have a ton of draft capital to make this work in a trade. Next player, Josh Giddey. Now, I know he's had off-court stuff, but looking at this, I just feel like he's the odd man out in OKC. I feel like this has kind of been the writing on the wall. He has one more year left, and then he's a restricted free agent. I just feel like he's somebody that needs to be playing with the ball in his hand. And I feel like on OKC, you're obviously going to have SGA, J-Dub. They both need the ball, and they're both better than Josh Giddey. And you trust them with the ball more than Josh Giddey. But he's somebody that if he's not running the offense and playmaking for others, you've seen him kind of get played out of the series against the Dallas Mavericks because it's kind of tough for him to play off the ball, especially with his inability or inconsistency to shoot the 3 ball. So looking at that, looking at Josh Giddey, looking at the best fits, Utah Jazz. I think this could be a great position for him if he goes to Utah. He has, especially what they do with Laurie, he could be somebody that can set the table for a lot of these young guys that they do have coming in the future and the young guys they already have now, because they don't really have a real playmaker in Utah. I think Colin Sexton is a great guard, in my opinion. I feel like he's really turned his career around. But I feel like he's more of a combo of two, like Keontae George. I think Keontae George is more of a combo too as well. But looking at Josh Giddey and what he can provide to the Jazz is getting them a real playmaker that can set the table for Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Keontae George, Colin Sexton, whoever they get in the draft. I think he could just make life a whole lot easier, especially when you have a real steady point guard. Because I think Josh Giddey has great playmaking ability. I just don't really think he fits at OKC with this current roster OKC has. And I feel like you can still get a decent return for Josh Giddey. Looking at the Pistons, I think Pistons could be a good fit now as well. Like Ivy, kind of with Keontae George and Colin Sexton, I feel like he's more of a two. I think he's at his best when he's looking to score and get his. Same with Cade Cunningham. I think he's great when he's even better when he's more so looking to get his. Even though he has great playmaking ability, I think having somebody like a Josh Giddey makes it easier for Cade Cunningham to get his, Jaden Ivey to get his, all their centers. I feel like Josh Giddey would work wonders with in the pick and roll. And then last team, looking at the Brooklyn Nets, kind of like the same situation. I'm kind of going off of a theme here. They have a Cam Thomas, and they have a bunch of tradable assets that I think could benefit an OKC. And I think Josh Giddey would have worked seamlessly in this trade, being a young player as he is, and he's somebody that Brooklyn could look at as a valuable building block piece next to a Nick Claxton, next to a Cam Thomas. So Josh Giddey I have at 8. And then at 7, Lauri Markkanen. Now, I'm interested to see what Danny Ainge does with this Utah team in this offseason. He has one more year left on his contract at $18 million before he becomes a free agent. Now, this is the point in time where you're looking at Lauri Markkanen and you're like, if you're not completely 100% on him getting an extension, you should possibly just trade him and get draft capital. You're not in a position to where you can just let him walk for nothing. You're a small market team already. If you can't for sure extend him, you might as well trade him this offseason. And yes, if you don't have, it's a 1 year, so the value might be not as high, but we've just seen Pascal Siakam get a decent return. OG Anunoby got a decent return with Quickly and RJ Barrett. I feel like he can kind of get that same level of return with his skill set. So you have to get something for Lauri Markkanen. Best fits, I feel, for Lauri Markkanen, I do have the Golden State Warriors. I feel like with what they want to do, the spacing they need another scoring option that they can go to. Now, I feel like him and Draymond Green in that front court could be pretty dangerous, especially with the way Draymond can play make. Next team I have is the Thunder. I feel like adding him and Chet to that front court could also be scary times because with his ability to rebound and still protect the rim at times and be that small ball 5, you can have nothing but spacing with Chet being able to space, with Lauri being able to space, and he's versatile. We've seen him play the 3, 4, and the 5, so with any of these teams, it could be very versatile, big spot, and he can score the ball. He can be their second scoring option at times. And then looking at last team I have is the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks, who, like I said earlier, with Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, Precious Achiuwa, they all could be on the move this offseason, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of space open in that front court, especially for a team that can be versatile in their lineups. You can have Julius Randle and Lauri play together. We've seen Lauri play the 3. This is more of an out-there option, depending on what happens this offseason. Like, putting together like best fits for the New York Knicks, it's very hard because they have a lot of moving parts that can go on this offseason. Because they have a somewhat complete roster, it's just that front court is in question. And they have 2 draft picks in the first round. So it's going to be interesting. They have a lot of moving parts this offseason, so it's kind of hard to figure out best fits, but I feel like the Knicks have the assets that the Jazz would want to get a Lauri Markkanen. And Lauri Markkanen could give the Knicks a ton of great things in rebounding, rim protection at times, spacing. You can never not have somebody like Lauri Markkanen with his versatility and everything he can do. So looking at next player on this list, we're getting into the top 6. Getting into this top 6, this is where it really gets interesting. Out there name, young guy. Hear me out. Cade Cunningham. I think Cade Cunningham could for sure be on the move this offseason. When you think about it, he has one more year left on his deal before they're going to have to extend him. If I'm the Pistons, I haven't seen anything from the team, not Cade Cunningham, because I'm not putting it on Cade Cunningham. I haven't seen nothing from the team that makes me think if we just lock up Cade Cunningham, anything's going to change. And I feel like the return you could possibly get for Cade Cunningham could be better than just extending him. So looking at what they could use and what they could do with a Cade Cunningham trade, obviously it's out there. He's younger. He's been the face of your franchise, but the franchise ain't been doing nothing. So I feel like they're in a unique position to where they could wash their hands with it if they didn't want to pay Cade Cunningham the money and just have a whole freedom of draft capital they could get for trading Cade Cunningham and a whole bunch of cap space that they could use if they don't sign Cade Cunningham to a long-term extension. And if I'm Cade Cunningham, this is what I would want to happen. But I feel like he could definitely be on the move. I mean, if Detroit made Cade Cunningham available, he is a bigger point guard / shooting guard that could do a lot for a bunch of different teams. The best fits, I see the Sixers. I think the Sixers could be a great spot for Cade Cunningham if he were to get traded. I feel like he could fit perfectly next to Tyrese Maxey. When you're looking at the Magic have a ton of young talent that isn't even playing on that roster that can go to Detroit and get an actual opportunity. And the Magic, looking at their roster, they're ready to compete now. I feel like Cade Cunningham is in a spot now in his career where he could be going to a team that's ready to compete and give them great production. Like, you put him with Paolo and Franz, it could be scary in Orlando. They have a ton of draft capital, a ton of young talent that they can move to make it happen. Another team, San Antonio Spurs. I mean, they could get that go ahead and trade for him. They have a ton of draft capital and a ton of young talent on that roster that they could trade to go get a Cade Cunningham to pair with a Victor Wembanyama, and then they could just extend Cade Cunningham. And then the last place I have is anywhere where the draft capital is. If they make Cade Cunningham available, which I think they should, just looking at the future of what they have in Detroit, because you haven't really seen anything from this team that makes you think there's anybody on this roster that is safe. I feel like everybody on this roster can be moved. But looking at, you got to go where the draft capital can be the best for you if you're Detroit. If I'm Detroit, you hit rock bottom and Cade Cunningham's about to need an extension and you're hitting rock bottom. He's supposed to be your franchise guy. I'm not putting anything on Cade Cunningham because I feel like Detroit's just a bad run franchise. But when I'm looking at it, what I've seen, you just hit rock bottom last year. And Cade Cunningham's going to need an extension. Like, I mean, I feel like he is a prime candidate to be traded, possibly this offseason. Number 5, Jalen Green. Jalen Green's another name. He has one more year left on his deal before needing an extension. And if I'm looking at the Rockets and what I saw from them this past year, Jalen Green's not your face of your franchise. It's Sengun. And then you have Van Fleet, Jabari Smith. You have a good draft pick this year. You have the 3rd overall pick. So if you're looking at this, best fits for Jalen Green, a best fit for Jalen Green is wherever you can get the most draft capital. Or, not more so draft capital. Let me rephrase that. You're going to trade Jalen Green to where the star lies. Jalen Green is somebody who still has a ton of upside in this league, but in terms of where Houston's at right now, and with having the 3rd overall pick, and with all the draft capital they already have in the stash from the Harden trade, Jalen Green in that 3rd overall pick, I mean, you could be sitting nicely. Say you hit Cleveland up. Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Green, 3rd overall pick, maybe another first or two. And you still got a ton of draft capital. And you still got a ton of young talent. You have young talent. They're going to be one of the deepest rosters in the league next year. They have a ton of young talent on that roster that isn't even playing. They could possibly have the best package for Donovan Mitchell. And Jalen Green could be in that discussion. Not saying Donovan Mitchell is the only star that they could go after and get to really complement this roster. But I feel like Jalen Green is somebody who possibly could be the odd man out. He has a ton of upside still, plus that 3rd overall pick, plus all the Nets picks that they do have. So it could be a very interesting situation for the Rockets this offseason, who could be looking to kind of take their roster to the next level. In terms of Jalen Green, I feel like he's their best asset to trade in terms of young talent and upside, plus if the team is willing to extend him as well, which I would assume they would be. He could be a nice little building block piece for another franchise when you, as a Houston Rockets, are ready to kind of compete. I mean, you barely miss out on the play-in, and you have so many assets and young talent to trade to get better. I feel like this is a perfect situation to where, like, if Donovan Mitchell does become available, you could trade Jalen Green in the 3rd overall pick or maybe another first or two and make it happen. So that's who I have at 5. Number 4. Super interesting one, Zach LaVine. Feel like he's been on the market for a while now. Looking at his contract, the contract is a big reason he hasn't been traded. Looking at the contract, 2 years left, 43 mims 45 M's, and then a player option for $48 million, a truly massive contract for Zach LaVine. He's still a player that I feel like has a lot left to give in a way. Like, I feel like the narrative on Zach LaVine is he's not a winning guy, and he's been having all these labels put on him. But I feel like Zach LaVine is still a phenomenal scorer. He's one of the better scorers in the NBA. And I feel like on a team, these two teams that I think are great fits for him. First, I have the Kings. The Kings need another scoring punch. When you're looking at them this offseason, they can only pay Malik Monk a certain amount of money. I can see a team coming in and overpaying for a Malik Monk and his services and him getting drawn away from Sacramento. But I feel like Zach LaVine could go fit perfectly in Mike Brown's offense next to a De'Aaron Fox and a Sabonis. I feel like they just need that other scoring punch. And playing him alongside Keegan Murray gives you spacing. I feel like they have the contracts to make this situation work in a trade. So it's going to be interesting to see if Zach LaVine and what the market is for him. The next team I have is the Golden State Warriors. Another team that needs a scoring punch. That's what Zach LaVine offers you. Somebody that can do everything offensively. He's for a Warriors team that really needs that secondary scoring punch that can create for himself outside of Steph Curry. Zach LaVine can be a perfect fit. I know the contract is large, like the Kings. They have the contracts in the situation to make it happen. So looking at number 3, we're getting into the top 3. Number 3, Brandon Ingram. Kind of going into the same thing. This is a little bit scary because his last year of his deal is $36 million. He's an unrestricted free agent after next year. And with just how the Pelicans are moving, I feel like they could be going in a different direction in terms of Brandon Ingram. You have Herb Jones, you have Trey Murphy that can seamlessly fit a little bit better next to Zion because he doesn't really need the ball in his hands all that much. But I feel like they would like to see what they could get in the market for Brandon Ingram. We've already seen Darius Garland trades, Jared Allen trades, shit like that. So next season, final year of his deal, I feel like if you're not going to extend him, you might as well trade him. Cavs are obviously a great fit, like I've said in this video already. Talking about that 3-4 man position, depending on what they do with Jared Allen. Brandon Ingram pairing up with a Donovan Mitchell could be scary next to an Evan Mobley. See that? We've seen kind of mocks of that already be done. Next team, like I said, kind of with Zach LaVine, the Kings, they need another scoring punch. Kings and Warriors, they need another scoring punch. I think Brandon Ingram fits with the Cavs, Warriors, and the Kings. Somebody who can generate offense on his own, who can be an offensive hub on his own, is something all three of these teams desperately need outside of the people that they already do have. And a Donovan Mitchell, and a De'Aaron Fox, and a Steph Curry. I feel like Brandon Ingram can fit seamlessly on all three of those teams. I think he is. If I had to bet money, I think it's going to be one of these three teams that he ends up getting traded to. With how I see the offseason turning out, I think Brandon Ingram is definitely going to be on the move. But getting into the top two, number 2, Jared Allen, common name as well. I feel like him being hurt this postseason has really impacted his trade market, and I feel like it's going to be more and more common if he does get traded, because we've seen Evan Mobley go to the 5 and kind of flourish more offensively. But he has 2 more years left on his contract. That is a steal of a contract at $20 million both years for what he gives you. OKC is the top of my list for where are the best fits for Jared Allen. I think him at that 5 with Chet gives him a true rim protector for sure. I have the Pelicans kind of correlating with that Brandon Ingram trade in a way. I feel like he gives them an athletic body at that 5 spot, something they really haven't had next to a Zion Williamson. Interested to see how that would work out. And then looking at the last team, I have the Warriors, somebody who has the contracts to make it work, kind of correlating within some of the contracts with Andrew Wiggins. Like, they have the money to make it work with these 3 teams. And I think he's the best fit with these 3 teams because they desperately need somebody of Jared Allen's caliber, somebody who's a double-double machine on any given night. And I feel like he's such a valuable asset, and for the contract he's on, I think it's a steal for a Cavs team that kind of is at the point now where they might have to trade him. And then looking at number 1, interesting situation, Mikal Bridges. Now, we've all heard about how Houston would have gave the Nets their picks back in exchange for the Suns picks and Mikal Bridges. That whole debacle, I think that was the best package, the best way for the Brooklyn Nets to kind of enter their rebuild, but not the smartest ran franchise. Looking at what they have in Mikal Bridges in terms of best fits, obviously the New York Knicks is going to be at the top of the list, just with the Villanova connection and everything they got going on there. Looking at his contract, it's honestly a steal. $21 million this season. Next season is $23 million. After that, it's 25 in the last year of his deal. So he's on a steal of a contract that really pairs well with a bunch of fitting pieces. I have the Knicks at the top of that list, of course. Next team I have is Houston. Houston could be a great fit. Houston, I feel like now with that third overall pick, kind of what I had, the package could be Jalen Green in that third overall pick, could open the door to them getting a Mikal Bridges, who I think would be a perfect fit on that team with a Van Fleet, Jabari Smith, Sengun, what they have building over there. And then the last team I have is the Kings. The Kings are in desperate need of another scoring punch on that perimeter, like I've said earlier in this video. I just think Mikal Bridges is destined to get traded this offseason. I think it's them. They've seen enough, because when he was traded to Brooklyn, he had the back half of the year where he was hooping. He was averaging like 25, 26 a game. I understand not wanting to trade him. Maybe you have something there, but obviously from this season, you see it wasn't that it was not Mikal Bridges and that he can't do that. I just feel like the team is just not in that position to get the best out of Mikal Bridges, to get the best out of a Cam Johnson, to get the best even out of a Cam Thomas. I feel like there's just too much going on this team to where like you're not getting the best out of your players. And I feel like Mikal Bridges, you could see maybe flourish with the Sacramento, flourish with the Houston. I already know he will flourish on the Knicks. But the Knicks are kind of the best option, but the worst, because I don't see the Nets trading with the Knicks just because that's the rival. And you giving them somebody like Mikal Bridges, who could be the key piece to the Knicks going to the finals out of the East. But I feel like Houston and Sacramento are two very sneaky teams that could go after a Mikal Bridges that could really fit into their roster and going forward, especially on his contract. They have the money to make it work. And the Houston Rockets have a very, very good package to kind of jumpstart that Nets rebuild with the third overall pick this year. You get a Jalen Green in return, possibly get another pick, possibly get another young player on that roster. So it's interesting to see what happens this offseason in terms of what kind of trades we could end up seeing, especially on draft night. I feel like draft night is going to be a huge, huge, huge night for trades. I can see a lot of movement. That's already kind of been reported that a lot of teams are kind of looking to move their draft picks and everything else like that. Because of the draft class, like I've already had my discussions on like what I think of this draft class in general. But looking at it, I feel like we're in for a very interesting offseason. It might not be the biggest star-studded free agency class, but in terms of trade and movement, I think we're in for a show for real. But that's all I have for this episode. Let's talk about it. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.